Today is Monday, February 23rd, and the time is 9 o'clock. The AB 3121 Task Force meeting is now called to order. Good morning. My name is Camila Moore, and I am the chair of the task force. Before we begin, let us have the staff do a roll call for attendance to establish whether we have a quorum. Parliamentarian Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will call the roll beginning with the chair. Chair Camila Moore.
Present.
Vice Chair Brown.
Present.
Member Bradford. Member Bradford. Member Grills.
Present.
Member Holder.
Here.
Member Jones Sawyer. Member Lewis. Member Tamaki. Member Montgomery Stepp.
Here.
I couldn't hear Member Tamaki, but I do see him present. I'm going to call again Member Lewis. Member Bradford. And Member Jones Sawyer. Madam Chair, the task force consists of 9 members. Five members are necessary for a quorum. We have 6 members present and a quorum is established.
Now that a quorum has established, I would like to welcome members of the task force and members of the public to our California Reparations February Black History Month celebration. So today we are gathered today to celebrate Black History Month and to also commemorate and celebrate reparations advocates of the past and future. Today is largely ceremonial in nature and tomorrow will be largely business. But today the task force wanted to take this space and opportunity to honor our ancestors, African-American ancestors who were sold and traded off the shores of Africa to build one of the greatest nations in the world, which is the United States. And we have so many wonderful speakers lined up to speak to the historical nature of this task force and of reparations advocacy in the United States. We also will hear from UC Berkeley Dean Erwin Chemerinsky on legal considerations concerning reparations, and we'll also hear from current reparations advocates doing reparations work today. So from a review of the agenda, you can see that it is a full agenda. So to ensure that we complete it during the time allocated, we will need to make sure that we follow the timeline established. So to help keep us on time, I'm asking each of us to be mindful, and I'll remind us as well if we start to fall behind. We do anticipate a fair number of comments from members of the public, which is scheduled from now to 10 a.m. So again, welcome, and we will now move forward to public comment. So Ms. Aisha Martin-Walton, take it away. Thank you so much.
Madam Chair, I wanted to let the record reflect that we've been joined by Member Jones Sawyer.
Great. Thank you so much, Parliamentarian Johnson.
And Senator Bradford.
Senator Bradford.
Welcome, Senator Bradford and Assemblymember Jones Sawyer.
Okay, good morning, Chair Moore, task force members, and members of the public. My name is Aisha Martin-Walton. I am with the Department of Justice, and the task force would like to hear your comments. The public comment period will be for 1 hour, and each person will have 3 minutes. Please be advised that in fairness to everyone, at the 3-minute mark, you may be politely interrupted and your microphone turned off. However, please know that there is a public comment period during each meeting, and the task force encourages everyone to participate. You may also submit written comments to the task force members at any time via email at reparationstaskforce@gov.ca.gov. To participate in public comment, please use the raise hand function. Locate the button on the upper right-hand side of the screen. On the sidebar, you will see the shape of a hand. Click on the prompt to prompt the raise hand feature. On our end, we will accept your raised hand. Then you will see a notification at the top of the screen to continue. You have to click the word continue. You will then be elevated into the meeting as a presenter and automatically muted until it is your turn to speak. Please note that there's a 20-minute delay between the attendee and the presenter mode, so keep that in mind as you're being presented. We will accept the raise hand feature as they come in, and once the person in front of you is done, Trini Hurtado, also with DOJ, will say your name to prompt you to begin. At that point, you can also have the option to turn on your camera. At the conclusion of your comments, at the 3-minute mark, you will be muted again and returned back to the level of attendee. So with that, Trini, let's hear from our first speaker of the day.
Good morning, everyone. The first speaker for today is going to be Kathy Masoka. Kathy, you have been unmuted. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, my name is Kathy Masaoka, and I'm a Japanese American, among many other Japanese Americans and other Japanese American organizations nationally who support reparations for African Americans. I testified back in February of 2021 on behalf and in support of HR 40, and was very proud that our community submitted over 300 testimonies in support of that bill. We support reparations for African Americans because it is owed, it is long overdue, and we as Japanese Americans know that it is possible. We fought for Japanese American reparations in the 1980s and won in 1988 for the incarceration of over 120,000 Japanese Americans during World War II. So we know that it is possible, and we really want to lend that inspiration to the movement today. We follow the lead of Black organizations and leaders. We know that it is up to the community to determine what kind of reparations they want. And we are committed to learning and relearning all that we can from reparations today and from reparations in the past. We do know that we owe a lot to the Black leaders for civil rights, for leading us, inspiring us, for supporting us for our redress. And we do believe that even though the context and history are different, and we can learn some things from redress from Japanese Americans, we have to remember that it may be different. And that some things, though, are the grassroots nature was really critical in winning redress and bringing the voices of so many to the forefront, hearing and learning their history and their stories, the education that it brought to the country, and the solidarity that we can build and built then and we can build now for reparations. And I think that's what we have to offer, and we hope that we can continue to support and build as Japanese Americans. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Masoka. Thanks for your comments this morning. Trini, our next speaker, please.
Next speaker is going to be Sharice. Sharice, you've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes to speak.
Good morning. My name is Sharice Cryer. I'm a second-generation Angelino and direct descendant of slavery on both sides of my family. I want to thank Professor Chemerinsky for being an amazing con law lecturer. I took Barbary in the summer of 2006 and had a better understanding of the law after the lectures. I would like to offer a suggestion to the Commission and DOJ to please really listen to the public comments, requests, suggestions, emails, etc. There's some good information being given. Also, we're about 6 months in with the Commission and just now dealing with the class of eligibility, and there's been no discussion of potential legal implications. The DOJ has all the resources available to examine both sides of the coin and different arguments and legal challenges, and I encourage you to do that as soon as possible. Also, back in July, I emailed the DOJ and task force to ask that you focus solely on the descendants of American slavery, policy change, and cash reparations. Please revisit the email. I also ask that you investigate something called a reparations superfund. This concept is mentioned in From Here to Equality. There is also a standalone article on the web about it. California cannot accomplish successful reparations program on our own. Finally, I just want to thank members Tamaki and Scott Lewis for being true allies. Your contributions have not gone unnoticed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cryer. Trini, our next speaker, please.
The next speaker is Roger Wareham. You've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Roger Wareham. I am a human rights attorney and a member of the December 12th Movement, which is a US-based non-governmental organization in consultative status with the United Nations, which focuses on protecting the human rights of people of African descent. We have been actively involved in the struggle for reparations for over 30 years. We were instrumental in the calling and organizing for the UN World Conference Against Racism held in Durban, South Africa in 2001. With the National Black United Front, we took over 400 people to lobby for what became the Durban Declaration and Program of Action, which historically recognized the transatlantic slave trade as a crime against, and slavery as crimes against humanity, that reparations were due to the descendants of the victims, and the economic basis of racism. We and NBUF also called for and organized the first national reparations rally, Millions for Reparations in Washington in 2002. And I am one of the lead attorneys in the lawsuits initiated by Deidre Farmer-Pellman, who's going to be on one of your panels later. I also presented at the CARICOM initial meeting on reparations due to the Caribbean. We have always, the December 12th Movement has always viewed reparations very simply as a collective repair for a collective injury suffered by Africans in the U.S. We view healthcare as one of the key issues affecting all people of African descent, or as Dr. Uche Blackstock stated in a seminar, living in this country has essentially made Black Americans sick. Since President Biden's election and his pledge to have Black people's backs, we have been waging a campaign to have him issue an executive order on reparations, including a $50 billion down payment towards provision of state-of-the-art healthcare facilities in Black communities across the country. As I said, collective repair for a collective injury, and we think that that attitude or that perspective should be taken into account in terms of your deliberations, in terms of how California is going to address this issue. As the slogan we coined back in the 1990s was, they stole us, they sold us, they owe us reparations now. Thank you for the opportunity to address you.
Thank you, Mr. Wareham, for your relevant comments this morning. Next speaker, Trini.
The next speaker is Joyce King. You've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes.
Yes, I'm Dr. Joyce King. I hold the Benjamin Mays Endowed Chair for Urban Teaching, Learning, and Leadership at Georgia State University in Atlanta. I'm a native Californian, descendant of enslaved Africans. My family came from Oklahoma and Louisiana in the 1930s. I have been raised in California. I was director of teacher education at Santa Clara University for 12 years. I'm a graduate of Stanford University, and I'm here to emphasize the point that reparations is more than a check. I want to commend the California Reparations Initiative. I served on the National African American Reparations Commission for a number of years, and I'd like to encourage you to look at the platform of NARC, which includes an education provision. I think repair includes education, not just for African Americans, but for everyone in America. We are currently experiencing an onslaught of legislation, turning back the clock, preventing teachers and professors from teaching the truth about American and world history. And reparations in California will be able to shine a light on possibilities for repair through rewriting knowledge. And I really hope that you will give deep attention to opportunities to repair education in the process of conducting reparations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. King. Trini, our next speaker.
Next speaker is Bryant Bowling. You've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes. Mr. Bowling?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You're a little low, but we can hear you.
Okay, my name is Brian Bowling, and I'm a member of the West Coast NCOBRA organization here in Oakland, California. I'm a retired social worker. My wife is a retired nurse. Our goal is to repatriate to Africa, particularly to Ghana, and reparations will assist us in our goal to repatriate. And we advocate also for dual citizenship, for us to have citizenship here in America as well as in a country in Africa. And I would like one of the panelists or someone in the panelists to address that issue, dual citizenship with reparation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowling. Trini, next speaker.
The next speaker is Robert Kalen Reed. You've been unmuted. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah. Continue.
All right. Since the beginning of Gavin Newsom calling to order the AB 3121 Commission, the majority of consistent attendees have made it clear that the reparations project should be lineage-based. This position is not based in xenophobia or anti-immigration, black, white, or otherwise, or ignorance that slavery or colonialism occurred in other parts of the world. It is rooted in the understanding that the group who experienced the accumulated harm of slavery, Reconstruction, Black codes and Jim Crow, U.S. terrorism, peonage farming, mass incarceration and convict leasing, excommunication from U.S. markets, banks and credit system, non-allowance of the GI Bill and VA loan, discriminatory zoning and steering practices, and all the accrued disadvantages since the signing of the emancipation should be the ones who inherit the repair. The slavery that a Jamaican descended person experienced in Jamaica is irrelevant to the justice claim Black Americans are fighting for in this country. We understand there are multiple countries who have valid justice claims that they could and should fight for, and Black Americans, American Negroes, American descendants of slavery, or sons and daughters of freedmen stand strongly in support of them, building those claims. But therein lies the issue. These people have to do the work. It is unfathomable to think that someone who got to America in the 80s, 90s, or yesterday should be able to hijack Black American history for gains meant to repair a harm they are not connected to. It is also outrageous to think that Black Americans must be attack dogs, pit bulls, or mules for the justice claims of other groups. Black America is not interested in the NARC and in COBRA Pan-African understanding that all Black is flat Black. Thus, Black Americans have to be the tip of the spear for everyone's fight while sacrificing their own. Speaking of NARC and in COBRA, there are many reparationist groups that have done the grassroots work to build momentum. Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore from ADOS, Friday Jones and Chad Brown from NAASD, and Logic Supreme, Ali Bey, and Naheem from Be the Power. They differ in many ways, but they all agree that this process needs to be as open and transparent as possible. This is the exact opposite of NARC and COBRA. They have purposely kicked advocacy groups out of meeting spaces so their ideas aren't challenged. They have been part of writing questionable bills that sits members of their organization on long-standing committees with no real reward for the people. And they have weaponized long-standing relationship with members of legacy Black organizations or government to sabotage their reparationist peer groups. Black America is not interested in these subversive tactics that pulls the power out of the hands of the people and centralizes it into a group who gets mad when they're questioned. If this committee was convened to do the will of the people, then the people say this process should be transparent and lineage-based. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kalen, for your comments this morning. Trini, our next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Greg Marcel Dixon. You've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Greg Marcel Dixon. I am a U.S. congressional candidate from South Carolina District 6, and I'm just here to make sure that everyone on the panel understands what reparation is and what reparations is not. Firstly, it's more important to understand what reparations is not. Reparations is not a payment from white Americans to Black Americans for the absolute horrors we endured during chattel slavery and then the government-sanctioned anti-Black terror we went through afterwards via redlining, Jim Crow, racial massacres, lynch mobs, and land theft. It is a payment from the federal government, which perpetuated these things, to freedmen who are of the lineage, referring to people who are descendants of those who were emancipated at the end of the Civil War. It is not something that goes to, quote unquote, all black people. Because when you look at the people who were lynched in those disgusting lynching postcards that were used and here in the United States of America and were often kept as souvenirs, it was not all black people hanging from those trees. It was freedmen, those who are descendants of the 4 million people who were enslaved by the American government. It is not something that includes any other group besides people of those lineage. Now, I find it very funny that California is leading the movement pretty much on the reparations mission, something that should have been done in 1865. I was not so familiar with California's history of anti-blackness, but I just assumed it had it because, hey, we're in the United States of America. But I did some research, and I found out that before California's admission to the Union in 1850, California actually had slavery. Then I discovered that California was home to several very wealthy freedmen communities. Allenstown, for example, was one of them. And because white Californians hated the fact of black Americans being successful, they cut the water off to Allenstown, they put a railroad track through it, and they destroyed that town. Santa Monica, I discovered, was 30% black, and yet some of the wealthiest people in Santa Monica were the black people who made that town successful. And again, the state of California used eminent domain to take properties from a lot of black people, and black businesses, they passed ordinances saying that music could not be played, alcohol cannot be served. So when I look at the data for California, and I see that even though black people make up only 5% of the population, and of that 5%, maybe 3% are actually black Americans, the people to whom I refer to as freedmen, but they make up over 50% of the people living in the streets. I'm not surprised, because what else were they left with? You took everything from them. You took their land. You took their businesses. You took their beachfront property from them. So California has a moral duty, as does the United States of America, to pay freedmen.
Excuse me, Mr. Marcel Dixon, I'm so sorry to interrupt you in the middle of your sentence, but thank you so much for your comments this morning. Trini, our next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Tracy C. You've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Tracy Cooper. I'm from Alameda County, Oakland, California. I was born in the early 60s, and I want to speak on who would be entitled to reparations. I believe that the reparations payment should be made to foundational Black Americans, that they should be paid to descendants of American slaves whose lineage can be traced to the killing fields of the American South. I myself suffered through forced integration in California through the school busing program, and the damage was so great that to this day I have not attended one of my high school reunions, which I think I'm coming up on my 45th high school reunion at this point, because my community was bused into Woodside, California. There were very few Black students. We were mocked as we were getting off of the school buses. We couldn't stay after school to participate in school sports and so forth, because once those yellow school buses left that high school, left the hill school and went back down to the flatland, we had no other way home. Only very few of us could participate. I believe reparations, the recipients can trace their lineage through the U.S. Census back to 1870, that those entitled would be shown as Negro on census records, on their birth certificates in California, either through the parent or the grandparent, that they have claimed Black all their time in California through school records, immunization cards, etc., and that they can prove California residency through the Department of Motor Vehicles, the voter records, the school records, hospital records prior to December 31st, 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tracy. Trini, our next speaker, please.
The next speaker is John Mudd. You've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. I am calling in because I too have concerns about how far we are in this process, and we're still questioning eligibility. I think that this should have been something that should have been hashed out from the very beginning, and it seems that Shirley Weber was very well, she thought it was very clear as far as what the intention was with this bill, and I think that for the most part, the people who have been calling in, the audience, the people have been very clear about what they want, and I think that Dean Ernst Chemerinsky will also bring some clarity to this matter as far as discussing what would be the best way to construct this legally as far as eligibility is concerned. I think it's clear that we have to base this on lineage, and that is for the people who descend from American chattel slavery. And also, I do agree with Shirley Weber that the free people who may not have been enslaved during the founding of America, but were enslaved earlier and earned their freedom, but were also eligible to be victims of slavery because they could have been captured at any time. Those people should also be included. But other than that, I don't know why this is such a hard thing for everyone to understand. It should be very clear that there has been a group who from the very founding of this country has been terrorized and disenfranchised, and it is our time to be repaired. And I think California is leading the charge, and hopefully it can influence the rest of the country and we could get something done federally. But those are my thoughts. Thank you for my time.
Thank you, Mr. Mudd. Trini, do we have anyone else?
Yes, the next speaker is Brooke Sinclair Duke. You've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, thank you. I'm specifically here testifying to make sure that we have exclusionary in whatever sort of eligibility criteria for reparations. No other group on this planet has ever had something as small as detrimental as a one-drop policy. Drop rule is still on the books for Black Americans. So because we are this discussion about reparations, everybody and their mama are suddenly claiming to be Black, suddenly claiming to be Black Americans, suddenly white people, white people, Africans, Latinos, everybody in their, everybody's got a cup, but they haven't chipped in. Quite frankly, I've come together to create a draft, an exclusionary clause to this that it lets people know that it is not based upon their just the lineage. It is, yes, the lineage first and foremost, also based upon the atrocities within that lineage. I am from a background of engineers. My family was lucky enough to pass for white rights, and they were able to use that ability to pass to buy land. They bought the land, the KKK would remove them in the middle of the night, the nearby state, cross the border lines, and then make them walk back. And that is a story that is not present in the Japanese. It is not present to or any other group who is currently receiving reparations from us, such as the $235 million that the Biden administration has recently given to Palestinians, and within the last year, the Biden administration has $56 million to Asian and Pacific Islanders and 1.2 to the tribal nations. There's no reason for us to be constantly scrambling, and that is our right when we have American terrorists that are us and keeping us from our right to prosperity and freedom. And so, yes, I do plan to submit the draft of the exclusionary policy called the anti-one-drop rule, and is specifically made to keep people out. And thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sinclair Brooks, for your comments this morning. Trini, our next speaker.
The next speaker is Brooke Sinclair.
He just spoke.
No, Stan Jackson, sorry. Stan Jackson, you've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes.
Good morning, members of the Reparations Task Force. My name is Stan Jackson, and I am the legislative chair for the California Association of Real Estate Brokers, and that is the organization that was created in 1955 to fight for and advocate democracy in housing. We are a member of the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, and the local chapter is the Consolidated Board of Realtors, which is our trade name. I'd like to thank Mr. Reginald Jones Sawyer for participating in our event this year, and I also like to thank member Monica Stepp for participating at the conference in San Diego last year. As a first VP of KRAB, California Association of Real Estate Brokers, I am also the legislative chair, and I'd like to invite members of the task force to participate in our virtual town hall on 3/24/2022 to continue the discussion on reparations. Any conversation about reparations must include a real estate component similar to the Evanston's reparations project. And this project is a down payment assistance program, but also we may want to work with the return of properties to the descendants of actual slave descendants and that suffered the humble institution of American slavery. The 40 acres and a mule we never received, and we definitely need to follow back up on trying to get those 40 acres. And as Reginald Jones Sawyer said, you can keep the mule, but we definitely need the acres. And with that being said, I'd like to thank each and every one of you, and I would love for you guys to come out to our virtual town hall and share any other information to our members, because we are a movement and we are here supporting the reparations for Black Americans in the United States, the descendants of slavery. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Trini, next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Tariq Nasheed. You've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes.
Greetings. How's everybody doing? Can you hear me clearly?
Yes. We can.
Okay. I appreciate everyone for talking about the reparations qualifications. We have to make this very simple. Reparations are exclusively for foundational Black Americans who were enslaved here in America. The reparations claim should go directly to people who are owed the 40 acres and a mule and their descendants. We have to stop muddying the waters when it comes to such a very important claim like this. We should not open the doors to giving reparations to everybody based on mistreatment, as one caller said earlier, because that will muddy the waters and we'll be right back to square one. Foundational Black Americans exclusively should get reparations. It should be in the form of cash payments, and it's not that difficult to find out who is a foundational Black American and who's qualified. If your lineage can be traced back to the 1870 census and your name is Negro on that census, you are a foundational Black American. And as our brother Sandy Darity said, people now who qualify must be classified as Black for at least 10 years, so we don't have a whole bunch of $5 FBAs popping up claiming to be descendants of slaves and foundational Black Americans. We have to make this cash payments. Every other group is getting cash payments. The Democrats just allotted about $10 million to Asian groups a few days ago. They are allotting money to Afghan refugees. They're allotting money to Hispanic refugees. So all of these other groups are getting cash payments. There's no confusion. The confusion comes when it comes to us. All of a sudden, the waters are muddy. Somebody was in here talking about repatriation to Ghana. We cannot have that. This is not what this is about. Nobody needs to go to another country. We're not from Ghana. We are foundational Black Americans. This is a nation that foundational Black Americans built, and we need to be compensated for what we built because we have the legacy of anti-Black racism that has disenfranchised us economically, so we need to be repaired economically. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Nasheed. Thank you for your comments. Trini, our next speaker.
Our next speaker is Marcus Champion. You've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes.
Good morning, Task Force. My name is Marcus Champion. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, you're good.
Yeah, my name is Marcus Champion. I'm a California native, born and raised in Inglewood, currently living in South Central. I want to talk about who is eligible. There's a reason why Secretary of State Dr. Shirley Weber allowed our organization, now known as CJAC, the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California, to make amendments to the eligible party. Originally, it was just African American, but she accepted our language that changed it to African Americans or descendants of persons enslaved in the United States, because it's a lineage standard, not a race standard. And I want to also address my fellow Black brothers and sisters who spoke before me, that we have to think about what's legal and not our feelings. As Dean Chemerinsky has stated before on our show, Politics in Black, if we make this about race and not lineage, violate Prop 209 in California. Federally, you violate equal protection. So that means that reparations is thrown out. Reparations is null and void if you make this about all Black people and not make it specific to the actual aggrieved party within the state and then also within the United States of America. So that is my comment for today. Thank you. Keep up the good work.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Champion. Trini, our next speaker.
The next speaker is LaDonna. LaDonna, you've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes.
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good morning. LaDonna Williams. I am a native of California, specifically San Francisco. And I just wanted to add many of the comments that I planned on making have already been made. Thank you, Mr. Nasheed, for eloquently pinpointing them. I wanted to remind the board that, or the committee, that March 2021, from March 2021 to April 2021, you were able to, San Francisco in particular, or I guess California, was able to come up with a resolution and support of Asian Americans. It took 1 month, pretty much in 7 days. They were able to come up with support of the Latino immigrants who were illegal trying to pass the border, yet $450,000 was on the table, or is on the table, or may have already been paid, who knows. The Afghanistans came behind them, yet Black folks are still waiting. We're still studying. We've been studying since the beginning of time. And even more so, we don't hear accountability to slavery, the slavery area that dealt with insurance. The insurance, it was a bill, SB 2199, I believe. And it was Senator Tom Hayden, and they were investigating the insurances that had paid for slavery. But when you go to those links, they're not working. You can get pretty much the summary of it, and certain insurances who admitted to paying and supporting slavery and made payouts, but you can't really get the gist of what we need so that we can pick up that ball and keep rolling with it as well. And I concur and totally agree with the previous speakers who says this is for those of us whose lineage have paid the price for our babies boiled, sold, fed to alligators, our parents separated, us having to do lineage search only to find out that our ancestors were not only owned by owners of America, regular white folks, but we were owned by Indians as well. And so we don't even talk about enforcing the 1866 treaty, which Black freedmen and their descendants are entitled to. Those are the focuses that this committee needs to stay focused on, not everyone else. It is not fair. We were not on the committees for the Asians and the Afghanistans and everyone else. Why is everyone else on our committees dictating who this money should go to? It is very clear that it is Black folks who have paid the price, who have built this country, and who continue to plead, beg, and pray that you do the right thing. So I would propose
LaDonna, I'm
in
so
the next
sorry.
30 days you come up
Ms.
with
LaDonna, I am so sorry to interrupt you, but your time is up. And thank you so much for your important comments this morning.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Laura Pitter. Laura, you've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to make a public comment today. My name is Laura Pitter, and I'm the current co-director of the U.S. program at Human Rights Watch. It's my honor to be here today to express my support on behalf of our organization for this task force and to honor during this meeting and Black History Month the African American heroes who initiated the fight for reparations and kept it alive over these many years in the United States. Human Rights Watch is an independent nonprofit organization that monitors and reports on human rights violations in more than 90 countries around the world, including the United States. We've supported reparations for enslavement and the legacy of it for decades, going back to the Durham Conference. Given that reparations for gross human rights violations, as slavery was, is well established in human rights law. For the last several years, we've increased our advocacy on the issue and made it a key priority. We've advocated strongly for the creation of a commission similar to the commission that's been established here in California at the federal level, though we also, where capacity allows, advocate for it at the local level as well. As I'm sure you all know, the full impact of creating laws and policies that forced hundreds of thousands of Africans to be enslaved in the US has never been fully examined or accounted for at the national level, nor has the impact of racist laws and policies that followed: Jim Crow, redlining, segregation, unprosecuted and investigated lynchings. It's never really been assessed. We know that the trauma of these policies has been passed down in a variety of ways through generations, and we support the idea that the type of reparation that needs to be provided has to be determined by the community impacted. So it's just I'm very pleased to be attending these essential sessions today, during which an accounting, at least for now, of how the impact has been felt here in this state is taking place. I really look forward to hearing from the speakers and the experts here so that we can learn from and be inspired by their actions in this history. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Pitter, for your comments this morning. Trini, our next speaker.
Next speaker is Matthew Morris. Mr. Morris, you've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes. Matthew Morris. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next speaker. We have quite a few. I'll work with him in the background.
Okay.
Next speaker is Friday Jones.
Oh shoot, it's me.
Friday Jones, you have 3 minutes to speak.
Good morning. I am Friday Jones. My name is Kansa Jones Muhammad, and I'm co-chair of the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants and a founding member of the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California. I'm also a commissioner for the city of Los Angeles as appointed by Mayor Garcetti. to the Reparations Advisory Commission, and today I am speaking as an individual. I advocate for reparations not just for myself, but for my mother, grandmother, and living family members who are survivors of Jim Crow law. It is also for the next 7 generations to come. My grandfather's family, the Ogburns, were sharecroppers in Caledonia, North Carolina. The land was claimed by the state in order to build a prison. To this date, that prison grows its own food. 7 generations ago, my great-grandmother Tracy was imported from the Congo and sold into servitude to Bernadette Martin, the wife of Lewis Martin of Charleston, South Carolina, and I quote, to hold the said Negro for her use and benefit as her property forever and her heirs on July 1st, 1779. This work is personal to me. Like many descendants of chattel slavery in the United States, there is no separation of our familial history and existence in this country from the country itself. At the last hearing, I read a list for you of considerations as you vote on eligibility, and I will read it again because it matters. Were your ancestors subject to the 3/5 Compromise at the United States Constitutional Convention in 1787, subject to the Casual Killing Act? Were your ancestors African or of African descent and enslaved in the United States, subject to hereditary slave laws from 1776 to 1865, subject to California's Fugitive Slave Law of 1852, subject to the Emancipation Proclamations that resulted in the establishment of the Freedmen's Bureau under the War Department for Refugees, enlisted as Negro Union soldiers during the Civil War and or received pensions under the General Law Pension System of 1862. Were your ancestors depositors into the Freedmen Bank, subject to convict leasing, black codes, or Jim Crow laws? Were your ancestors or grandparents part of what is known as the Great Migration from 1910 to 1970? Lineage-based reparations must be derived from the overwhelming laws endured by chattel slaves in the United States and their descendants for multiple generations. This is the work that this task force must do. I ask you to remember our ancestors, making their heirs the beneficiaries of reparations with the foresight that it will matter in a federal repair. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Jones, for those powerful comments today. Next speaker, please.
Okay, we're going to try Matthew Morris again. Mr. Morris, you've been unmuted. You have 3 minutes. He was having some mic issues. I'll just move to the next person.
Okay.
Phyllis Fulton, you have been unmuted. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. I'm not sure that I have the correct information about the conference. I'm in North Carolina, and I just learned about it last night. I don't know if it's just for people in California who are considering who should receive reparations. One thing that I wanted to say is, as you develop the laws, you remember or realize that you could be a model for the rest of the countries as they address the reparation issue. And the things that I would like for everyone to keep in mind is that after the law is passed, we have to make sure that the issues related to a backlash addressed before, while as the law is being written, because a lot of times when we write laws, it's done out of reaction. It's a reactionary purpose, but we also have to think about the long term. How is it going to affect everyone, and what can we do up front to make sure all of those backlash issues are addressed before it becomes a real national crisis. That's one of the things that I wanted to add, because I want to see everyone who's entitled to a reparation to be able to receive it, but I don't want to see a lot of backlash from various groups or various races or various nationalities. So if we work up front to address those, then that should take care of a lot of that as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fulton, for your comments. Trini?
The next speaker is Sisterella. You've been unmuted. You have 3 minutes. Sisterella, are you ready to speak?
I'm sorry, good morning or afternoon. I am a native Inglewoodtonian, I guess if you could say that. I am part of the Tatum family, and growing up as a monarch, the stories that you would hear in California about how the impact of slavery and the impact of discrimination has affected our communities in around Los Angeles was so detrimental. And I really would like reparations to definitely also make sure that mental health awareness is also included in reparations, and that a protective class status is set as a precedent in the reparations package for Californians. And at the end of the day, that lineage does matter, as Dr. Weber says, and that being a descendant of freedmen also means that we should be recognized in legislation throughout California as such. And just dating back to Cali House, and also bringing up the fact that we are representation of our ancestors who have been emancipated and did not get to be acknowledged. And so I would like to acknowledge my ancestors, the Tatum and Swearington family, and the Howard family, and the Smith family. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sisterella, for your comments this morning. Trini?
Okay, we are going to go back to Matthew Morris.
Okay.
Mr. Morris, you've been unblocked. You may now speak. You have 3 minutes.
Can everyone hear me now?
Very low, but yes.
Okay, apologies. So, first off, and I've also been blessed with the opportunity to speak during the public comment section in January. I understand the importance of taking advantage of these occasions to be a part of the public comments. After all, my ancestors sacrificed life and limb for me to be able to speak here today. My grandmother cleaned schools and houses for her grandchild to one day be able to speak. My mother worked long hours inside and outside of the house to not only allow for me to be able to speak here today, but to do so with intelligence and confidence. So today, I would just like to remind us that we are all not here just for ourselves, not just for our ancestors, but for the ones that never made it to get to this point, for the ones that never survived the trip across the ocean, the ones that perished in bondage, to the many souls that sat in inhumane conditions in Goree Island, the place that my ancestral tribe of the Fula now inhabit, the men, women, and children that were taken from their native land only to see home within reach but would never step foot on its shores again. I say thank you for all of you that are contributing your time, your energy for this movement. The very work that you are doing is truly an inspiration. Let me humbly remind us of all the saying that we must never forget, the wisdom of our elders that told us, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so with solidarity and love, I say that the work is not done. The soil is merely tilled. The sprouts are yet to have sprung, but they are coming. The harvest not yet reaped, but it is coming. The victory is not yet here, but it is coming. Let us continue to tend the work that needs to be done to provide a brighter tomorrow that will lessen the darkness that may emanate from the hardships of today. And to the souls that have profited from the system that has inflicted so much pain to our communities, the bill has come due. My name is Matthew Morris, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Matthew Morris. Trini, our next speaker.
Okay. Our next speaker is Ernest. Ernest, you've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes.
Oh, greetings, Task Force members. My name is Ernest Russell, and I'm located in the state of Michigan. Like always, I want to commend you guys for the work that you are doing. And, I just want to, build off of what previous speakers have already made clear. I think it's pretty evident that you guys are leading the nation on the topic of defining what a true reparations program should look like for the descendants of freedmen or those who share that pedigree. As a descendants of those who were held in bondage, I would like to ask that the task force support Secretary of State Weber's comments regarding the community of eligibility. I believe that, if you guys were to follow her definition of the community of eligibility, and not only her definition, but making sure that the program is lineage based, I believe that we would be taking a step that America has never done, which is addressing the specific group that it has harmed over the last few decades and centuries of this country's existence. And I think, like many of your, many of the presentations that were put together shows that we need to have some sort of specificity and focus that is geared towards the community of eligibility, specifically those who endured the harm, so that we actually get this right the first time around. This task of reparations for Black Americans who descend from slavery is actually a pretty large task, and I do commend you guys for some of the conversations that were held, as well as some of the proposals that were made by your task force. I think it's truly revolutionary, and coming from the state of Michigan, where we only have a local city task force that's seeking to study reparations proposals in the city of Detroit, we are in hopes that we can also secure a state task force for the state of Michigan, in which we could achieve some of the same things that you guys are seeking to achieve, at least until the federal reparations program is passed. So with that being said, I just want to, ask the task force to consider, sticking with Shirley Weber's comments regarding the community of eligibility, and recognizing that if you guys were to do so, you would truly be doing a service to those who descend from freedmen or those who were formerly enslaved in America. And with that, I want to thank you all for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Russell. Trini, let's do a check-in. Public comment ends officially at 10:05, and that would be about 3 more speakers. How many do we have in the queue? Let's let Chair Moore know.
We have 4. We have about 9 speakers still in the queue.
Yes, I was going to say, just a point of order or clarification, the first panel officially starts at 10:15. And so given the ceremonial nature of today, we can extend the time up until our first panel up to 10:15. So if we have 9 speakers, that's great. If there's any additional speakers before the 10:15 a.m. mark, that's also fine.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Cato Amir. You've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes.
Hello, everyone. I'm Cato Amir here, and I'm just calling to speak about eligibility and say that eligibility should be limited to the people who are descendants of the people who actually went through the harms that were done. And reading up on California, I read that in 2021, California gave almost $2 million to people who are in the country illegally. If California can give almost $2 million, over $2 million to people in the country illegally in just a matter of months, they can definitely give resources and cash to those who are descendants of the people that were enslaved by the American government. So it's not a matter of what needs to be done, because the wrongs that have been done to Black Americans, freedmen as I call them, is well documented in the United States of America. It was going on until the 1970s, and the legacy still happens today. It's much easier to find the descendants of those who were enslaved by the American government than it is to find people in the country illegally who are usually trying to avoid authorities. So if we can do it for people in the country illegally, we could do it for people who built the country and has made it the great country it is that others seek to get into. And that's what I want to say right there. And I want to thank y'all for spearheading this initiative. It's funny that a state level government is taking on this task when federal leaders like Karen Bass of California is not doing it. She can't even bring herself to say the word Black. She says minority institutions. So I want to thank y'all for being bold enough to do something specifically for Black Americans who are descendants of the enslaved, because our federal leaders sure as hell are not doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amir. Trini, our next speaker.
Our next speaker is Maya Iwataki. You've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. My name is Mia Iwataki, and first I'd like to really thank the task force for their hard work and for the education and for the report that's coming out and for the community engagement hearings that they're planning. I was a founding member of the National Coalition for Redress and Reparations. This was a campaign, as you all know, to win redress and reparations for the 120,000 people of Japanese descent who were put in concentration camps during World War II. Our movement for reparations was really inspired by the civil rights and liberation movements of the Black and Chicanos during the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And that was what guided our work as a grassroots organization. I wanted to also thank you for recognizing during Black History Month some of the legacy organizations that in the African American community that have been talking about reparations for years. This is how I first heard about reparations, through the Republic of New Africa members who talked about the concept of reparations, and it was very informative for us. One of the things I quickly wanted to say was we, working with Congressman Mervyn Dimely, who was my boss at the time and the chair of the Black Congressional Congress, did work with him to author a bill calling for immediate monetary reparations for the Japanese American people. But instead, the bill to establish a commission won. And at first we were very, doubtful about that because our people were dying. But I wanted to just say that the commission hearings changed my life. They were so healing. Our people were holding back for so many years. They were healing. They put a human face on the issue for the country, and they were unifying. And through our stories, we saw the shared histories that we as a people had with other communities of color in the United States. And so I really commend the work that you're planning to do on the community engagements. And our community, realizes that as we won monetary reparations, that we also have a responsibility and a desire to support other struggles for reparations. And with Nikkei Progressives and NCRR today, we are working with the some of the legacy organizations on to support HR 40, and we would offer.
Ms. Iwataki, I am so sorry to interrupt you in the middle of your sentence and thought. Thank you so much for your comments today. We really appreciate it.
Our next speaker is Woolard Lett. You've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Woolard Lett. I was born and spent my early childhood in Mississippi. I currently serve as the male co-chair for the New England chapter of the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. And we commend California for the work that you're doing, but we also want to remind California that reparations means full repair. And COBRA has identified 5 injury areas that are a result of African chattel enslavement and its ongoing vestiges here in American society. But in addition to those 5 injury areas, we've also identified 5 remedies which are outlined in international law. One of those remedies is compensation. We agree that compensation is necessary, but while necessary, it is insufficient to provide full repair for the injuries of African chattel enslavement and its vestiges. In addition to compensation, we require and request rehabilitation, both physical and mental rehabilitation for the injuries that have been caused in the area of health. We require and request restitution. Restitution is restoring a people to its former stature and status. and, to address the injury area of peoplehood, nationhood that was suffered by as a result of African chattel enslavement and its ongoing vestiges. A third remedy is cessation and guarantee of non-repeat. We don't have to talk a lot about that. We see as we look around the kinds of things that are happening, this ongoing legal lynchings as well as extrajudicial killings that we see in our communities across the land. And finally, there's satisfaction. Satisfaction, according to our esteemed elder Dorothy Benton Lewis, it's not over till we say it's over. We need satisfaction. We cannot allow the fox to decide what's enough for the hen house for the crimes that they have committed. So we thank you for taking this step on this journey, and we look forward to supporting you in any way that we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lett. Our next speaker, Trini.
Our next speaker is Reginald McKinley. You've been unmuted. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Reginald McKinley. Just want to make sure you can hear me. Can you hear me? Thumbs up?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much for forming and being part of this reparations task force. As an individual who lives in Southern California, specifically Los Angeles, I know how important it is to connect the dots on how we've been impacted and in what ways we look to repair. Specifically, I would love to connect with you all and partner with you. I've done extensive research on Capitol Hill and from local level up to federal level, and I'm interested in really putting my hands in and doing some lifting with you all. I've applied for the research role that you guys have listed as the research data specialist, and so if you're interested in having that type of help, I'm open to it, and I would love to connect with whoever is over that process. Again, if there's someone I could talk to, email or something, throw it in a chat. Other than that, I'm going to stay on and just really absorb what you guys are offering and see in which other ways I can support all that you are doing. Thank you so much, and have a beautiful day and a great meeting.
Thank you, Mr. McKinney. Trini, next speaker.
Our next speaker is Dr. Kimberly Ellis. You've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. Good afternoon. I want to thank the California Reparations Task Force and Dr. Shirley Weber for her leadership, both in California and federally, as she works with HR 40 to continue the work of the late John Conyers and that of NCOBRA, the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, and specifically Omari Obadeli, who started that work. I helped personally launch and work directly on the legal case for the Tulsa Reparations Commission, which I believe is the first modern state-led reparations justice claim. So I really honor the work that the California Task Force is doing today. I worked directly with Charles Ogletree, Johnny Cochran, Randall Robinson, Ajiwa Ayatoro, Dennis Sweet, and Michelle Robinson, and others. And I want to honor that work. I'm really glad that Hakeem Jeffries put in Tulsa in HR 40 because I really believe that it is the quintessential case that will answer this call for reparations. I support reparations of direct payments for the lineage of African Americans enslaved in the United States and for all Black people for modern systemic racism and injustice, especially those who are victims of police and citizen brutality, such as Laquan McDonald, Sandra Bland, Ahmaud Arbery, and Dante Wright, and others. Obviously, we also know George Floyd. So I want to stand here just in honor of my ancestors and ask you all to definitely consider that we really shaped American democracy, especially during Reconstruction. We were denied justice. We were denied everything that we worked for, literally from that period of Reconstruction until now. It's been nothing but a struggle. It's been nothing but rollbacks. Every time we make an achievement, we have white supremacists that are in the American government that work very hard to roll back those achievements. One example is the John Boyd farmers compensation bill. I also want to point out that Donald Trump worked very hard to make sure that white South Africans displaced Black Mississippi farmers. So we really need to get very specific and to work to be very clear about the work that we're doing. So I support you all. I stand by you all. I stand by all who are working on reparations, because it's a very tough situation to have to convince the public that it needs support. And I also want to hold space for those who are working on the federal level. I invite the CBC to actually finish getting involved, and to also for the other Democrats and Republicans to make a stand for Black America once and for all. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis. Thanks for your comments. Next speaker, please. Trini, do we have anyone else?
The next
Check,
speaker
check.
is Cash Gaines. You have 3 minutes.
Yo, peace to the panel, peace and reparations, and to Don Tamaki, a deep bow. I want to say first, we're considering this Black Future Month. I just want to make that clear. I want to say, since this specific meeting is about current efforts for reparations, I wanted to mention direct cash payments specifically. I feel like plenty of people are able to speak to what the issue has been. I just want to speak to what I think some of the redress could look like. I mentioned months ago when I called into, I would say, the second task force about Oregon's Senate Bill 619, which offers lifetime payments of $123,000 a year, tax-free. I'm suggesting that California multiplies that by 10 for California, just based on its economy. I ain't no math surgeon, but clearly lifetime payments are an example of what true redress can be, instead of just a single check. I just want to make that clear. By the way, the Holocaust reparations claim was three-pronged, and one of those prongs was $125 million of lifetime payments as well. And we can also shout out Obama, who gave them $12 million of American money. I want to mention that for direct cash payments, our elders who've survived to 50 years old and above, I don't want to set a specific, age, not out of disrespect, but they need to receive an upfront cash payment as well. It shouldn't be that we're all receiving a check at the same amount at the same time. Our elders who survived this system need $5 million up front if California can achieve it. Now, Evanston was mentioned earlier for housing. I think it should be well understood that $25,000 stipends when the housing market is $400,000 there means that $40,000 is how much you need for a down payment. We need to make sure that the numbers are correct there, which is why I want to mention the Japanese reparations claim. Mr. Tamaki and I'm sure Ms. Iwataki, who called in earlier, already know that they received direct cash payments, but their checks were based on the appraisal of their houses in the 1940s and not in modern day. We're not falling for that same trick bag again. We want our 40 acres, as a realtor said earlier, and we're not forgetting the mule. Y'all know I called in saying it's 40 acres in a Tesla. We can call it an electric vehicle. There's a Black-owned electric car company, MIMS Motors, and California already pays $14,000 towards the first electric vehicle that anyone buys there through the federal EV tax credit, as well as a California one. So they can extend that to pay for Black Americans' electric vehicle, have us in a clean Black Future Month world. And lastly, HR 40, as was mentioned early, is named after 40 acres and a mule. I just want to make that clear, that 40 acres is owed to the descendants of American chattel slavery who were here at the end of 1865. No one who came after. Thank you guys for the space and time.
Thank you, Mr. Gaines. Thanks for your comments today. All right, Trini, how many more people do we have in the queue at this point?
There are 4, including the next speaker.
Very good. Okay.
Okay, the next speaker is Harriet Barton. You've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes.
All right. Hello. Thank you, panel. Thank you for all of your work. And I usually call in every time through public comment. And I know you guys have heard the word lineage a lot today, so I know you'll be focused on the fact that these reparations, also on the federal level, should be lineage based. And it's not that hard to prove who's eligible, because people know, if they were born here, their parents, their great-grandparents, and people know what they've identified as. And I think Dr. Darity's looking in his book, it makes sense to have a 10-year thing there where you've identified as that, because people will have changed who they identify as, but it's not that hard to figure those two things out. So lineage is number one. It's very important. I wish it would have been decided earlier, but I know you guys have to do the work. And also reparations is cash. I mean, everybody knows it's cash because cash is a lot of things, but it's also policy and protection and enforcement of those policies is very important, and only the government can do that. And I'm hoping that California can be this great model and that it will spill over to federal reparations. It's just not that hard to figure it out. And also, you know, if any jobs are coming from that, it needs to be to benefit the people, the ADOS people. And I'm saying that because no one was talking about reparations recently until that infamous hashtag that people don't like to talk about. I didn't start it, but I do follow it. American Descendants of Slavery. No one was really talking about reparations. It was dead on arrival. Yes, we have HR 40, but HR 40 is trash. It's going nowhere. And it should just die on the Senate floor because it's not going to benefit the people. And also, we're in California, and I wish that the focus would be on discrimination here. Yes, discrimination is a problem, but it's here. All you have to do is look at the streets. Look at all the homeless people. Most of them are Black, probably ADOS. And I bet these people have been discriminated against. Maybe employment, who knows what. But we have a big problem here. We have a language discrimination problem. You can't even get employed unless you're speaking Spanish, so they say. And that's a huge problem. And my daughter had to leave this state last year just to be gainfully employed. And it has affected me as well. And I'm sure a lot of people, if you would just ask the people. So I just wish you just focus on the lineage, please. And also, I think that's all. And I just want to say, please don't let AB 3121 be trash. I just have to say that. Don't let it die on a Senate floor somewhere. It needs to be the focus of lineage. Thank you, panel.
Thank you, Ms. Barton, for your comments this morning. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Tony Tinker. You've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Tony Tinker. I have spoken towards the panel several times, and I also applaud your work for moving forward. I work for California State University, Sacramento, and I sit on the Black Parallel School Board, which has lawsuits towards discrimination for special education students. I sat on the advisory board for Sacramento City for Black students because of the discrimination. I've also worked with Dr. Shirley Weber on various bills, especially ethnic studies, as a humanities advisor towards ethnic studies, and that was passed. But I'm speaking to you today on my own behalf because of personally this work has impacted me. This work has pushed me to look at my own heritage, my own lineage, and go back and look at and explore that. And I found some surprising things. And the students that I work with every day and see every day, and the average Black people that are here in Sacramento who have been dealing with discrimination in Sacramento for a very long time, need to know these things, need to have the power. So I hope that you continue to do whatever reparations come, whatever monetary values come. I hope that you had a speaker talk about that there was a patchwork of finding our lineage, finding our history. And I hope that you empower everyday people to do this and give them the power of the shields and so forth, because many of our young folks would do more things if they knew they came from this lineage, if they knew they came from these people who fought in this way. And even if it is a very small way, we need to think about those young people that we are pushing forth, where someone said it's 7 generations down the road we're looking at. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tinker. Trini, I believe we have 2 more speakers.
Yes, there's still one pending, but he's not pressing continue, so hopefully he will before the next 2 finish. The next speaker is Angela Nirvana. You've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
We can hear you.
Wonderful. Thank you and good morning. Just a second. I'm so sorry. A new report from the Pew Research Center highlights striking data about the population growth of Black immigrants in the U.S. According to the study, there were 4.6 million Black immigrants living in the U.S. in 2019, an increase of 3% since 1980. The report adds that about 1 in 10 Black people living in the U.S. are not born in America. As of 2019, 60.8 million Hispanics are in the U.S., 10 million of whom are in California. 18.64 million are Asian, 41.99 million Blacks in the U.S., 4.6 million of which are Black immigrants. At this rate, according to the data, the country's Black immigrant population would eventually exceed U.S.-born Blacks. The U.S. Black immigrant population is expected to increase to 9.5 million by 2060, doubling the current total. About 9% of Black people in the U.S. are second-generation Americans who have at least one parent born abroad, according to Pew. Looking at the socioeconomic status of Black immigrants, the data reveals that they have more college degrees than U.S.-born Blacks and a higher median household income and wealth than freedmen. Still, it states, and I quote, Black immigrants face the same amount of discrimination as freedmen Black born in the U.S., the study concludes. Now see, this is what is troubling to me when it comes to that statement. Black immigrants who have more education than freedmen Black, more home and business ownership, more income and wealth, by and large do not live amongst the freedmen whose national median incomes are less than $40,000 since COVID. And the median home price here in California is $834,000. Black immigrants do not suffer the same rates of police brutality and state-sanctioned executions, preschool to prison pipelines, incarceration, foster care, unemployment, underemployment, homelessness, lack of home and business ownership. It is imperative that we address the weaponization of immigration against freedmen to make us the permanent bottom caste in the country our ancestors built with their lives. It is imperative to disaggregate Blackness so the state will see its abject failure wherein freedmen is concerned. It is imperative that those of us who've been legislated out of this state and counting receive redress because of the policies here. It's imperative that we do this so that you can clearly see that Black immigrants who by and large just got here aren't owed reparations. I
Ms.
thank
Madonna?
you so much for your work and for allowing me to share. God
Thank
bless you
you.
all.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments this morning. Trini, we are, and Chair Moore, I believe we are close to the end of our public comment speakers. And
There are
Trini, we can have one more?
two left.
more? Okay.
Kenneth Henry, you are next. You have 3 minutes. You've been unmuted.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Kenneth Henry. I am a proud member of the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. But even more than that, I was born and raised in the great state of Virginia, and all of my ancestral lines begin and end there. The state where all of this began. It is painful to sit here and to listen at us as a people go against each other. We all have to admit that our ancestral blood is mixed into the soil of this country for forever. I would like to honor this task force. I am so proud to be a part of this event. It's historical. And as a advocate for passage of H.R. 40, these are learning moments for me. And I am sitting here grasping every piece of information because even as we can all agree, money is good. Yes, we agree direct payments must happen, but no amount of money, no check, no matter how large, can repair 400 plus years of harms and injuries. And we must be about not just the money. And someone said it. If it's going to be money, we should be able to establish a fund and draw down from that fund into perpetuity. Because we all know if we got a direct payment, it cannot cure the harms of the mental health issues that we deal with every day, the physical health issues that were laid bare with COVID-19. In around the country in urban areas, we have some major issues with our young people. A check cannot repair those harms. We have to be about the business of curing our communities. And in order to do that, we must have true redress. I'm not going to belabor all that you have said, other than to say, while I agree direct payments are appropriate, we have to have true redress. I would like to say that the State of the Union message is Tuesday night. I would ask all of us to definitely call upon the president to do more for people of African descent. He has a Black agenda. I have not seen much come out of that agenda, and reparations are definitely long overdue. In ending my conversation, I would like to also honor Dr. Shirley Nash Weber for her vision, for her ability to follow through on it. But I also want to acknowledge someone in the state of California that I believe is an ancestor and whose shoulders I think we all stand on, and that is Queen Biddy Mason. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Henry. Thanks for your comments. Trini, this is our next.
Our last speaker. Last speaker is Christopher Lodgson. You have been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. First of all, I want to thank everybody who is watching, who is listening. This has been a fire public comment session. I want to thank everybody in the chat, everybody who is watching on YouTube. Also, this has been an amazing, again, public comment session. I want to say one thing about eligibility quickly, and then I'm going to give some official comment from CJEC, Coalition for a Just and Equitable California. So I'm going to speed up a little bit here. On eligibility, my position is pretty simple. Reparations are for those of us who descend from U.S. slavery in this country. So it's a lineage-based claim, specifically and exclusively. I don't think we can mess with that. It's not just a moral issue. It's not just a right or wrong issue. I think you're going to hear from Professor Chemerinsky today that it's also a legal issue. If we don't make this lineage-based, then we are going to raise not just a Prop 209 challenge, so not just a Section 31 of the California Constitution challenge. We're also going to raise possibly a 14th Amendment challenge, and possibly also going to raise a Civil Rights Act challenge from the 1960s Civil Rights Acts. So we have a legal obligation and also a moral obligation to make this reparations eligibility question lineage-based. I want to put my CJEC hat on right now, though, and give some official comment. One, thank you all. You are all making Black history. We are all making Black history this month. That includes everyone on this task force and everyone in the chat and everyone that's been a part of all of this work to get us to this point. We're all closer to reparations today because of all of the work that everyone is doing here. That's everyone. So that's those are watching, talking in the chat, commenting on the phone, and on this task force. Thank you for selecting CJEC as an anchor organization. Also want to thank California Black Women's Health Project for being our fiscal sponsor to make that possible. I want to thank ETN Media Group for live streaming the meetings right now on YouTube. Shout out to the YouTube chat, what's going on. And also I want to invite everyone here to our next community listening session, which is going to be an independent listening session on Tuesday, March 1st, next Tuesday in Richmond, California. You can get more information about that at our Twitter, our Facebook, and our Instagram at CJEC Official. Join us. We're going to be live in person in the community like we always do. Peace.
Thank you, Mr. Lodgins. Thank you all. We have now reached the allotted time for public comment today. If you are not able to provide comment, we invite you to attend future public meetings. There's one tomorrow morning. Or submit written comments or testimony via email at reparationstaskforce@doj.ca.gov. Thank you, Trini, and I will now turn it back to Chair Moore. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Martin Walton and Ms. Hurtado, for facilitating the public comment period, and thanks to all who provided public comment this morning. But before we get to our illustrious, yes, Vice Chair Brown, you're recognized, but we have to approve the minutes from January. Vice Chair Brown, you're recognized.
I went through the minutes approved, then I asked to be recognized.
Yes. So there's a motion on the floor to approve the minutes as presented. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. So it has been properly moved and seconded to approve the January meeting minutes as presented. Parliamentarian Johnson, may you please cue the vote for a roll call?
Yes, I will. Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Yes.
I just wanted to, thank you. I just wanted to note that there are a couple of edit suggestions, nothing in terms of content, but just minor edits on both the January 27th and January 28th meeting minutes, and I've highlighted those in yellow, and I can send them back to the staff. There's small things like, extra words in a sentence, or on page 14 under funding, under the funding heading, it should say the Bunch Center, not the Bunch Foundation. So I don't want to take up all of the time to go through those, but I can give those to DOJ. Again, nothing substantively content change edits.
That would be perfect. Thank you, Dr. Grills.
Madam Chair, you want to change your motion to approve as amended?
Sure. So we can, yes. So the motion is, do we approve the minutes as corrected or as amended? Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, so it's been properly moved and seconded that the January meeting minutes will be amended pursuant to the comments of Member Grills. Is there any discussion on the matter? Hearing no further discussion, Parliamentarian Johnson, may cue the roll call vote, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Chair Moore?
Aye.
Vice Chair Brown? Vice Chair Brown?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the task force, I want to share in the spirit of the acknowledgement that our chairperson gave of African American History Month.
Vice Chair Brown, we'll hear comments from you, but we need to finish the vote, and then I'll go right to you before we go to our panel.
Excuse me, I didn't know you. Go ahead.
No problem.
Go ahead.
So I think she's asking for your vote on the minutes as amended. Aye or nay?
Aye.
Is that Vice Chair Brown, aye?
Yes, it's
Member
aye.
Bradford? Thank you. Member Bradford? Member Grills?
Aye.
Member Jones Sawyer?
Aye.
Member Holder? Member Lewis?
Aye.
Member Lewis, aye. Member Tamaki? Member Montgomery Steppe? Aye. Excuse me. Madam Chair? Six members voted. 6 members voted aye. No members voted nay.
Thank you. So the vote was 6 ayes and 0 nays. The ayes have it and the motion carries. The minutes are approved as amended. So before we introduce our illustrious panelists for our first panel, I would like to return to Vice Chair Brown for any remarks that he has. Vice Chair Brown, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the task force. I beg your indulgence that I would share with you that in the spirit of our chairperson who acknowledged that we are meeting now in the wake of observing another African American history month, that it would be a good thing for us to acknowledge, since our two sisters came on and spoke from the Japanese community in support of our efforts, that we would also state the historical fact that it was in 1944, when unfortunately this nation, under the leadership of FDR, brought this painful experience to the Japanese community, putting 120 people in those concentration camps. During that painful period, it was a Black Baptist preacher, theologian, and scholar, Dr. Howard Washington Thurman, who here in San Francisco, in alliance with Dr. John Fisk at San Francisco State, called into being the first interfaith, interracial church in these United States of America, at the first Congregational Church here on Franklin Street. And they established their first item on their agenda, coming out in defense of the Japanese community and calling for this nation to back off of its evil deed of putting people of Japanese ancestry in those concentration camps. Secondly, I wish to acknowledge here that it was a Black Baptist preacher again named George Washington Williams who really got us on our way in terms of acknowledging our rich, royal, and rewarding history. And this man was brought to our attention by the one and only John Hope Franklin, who wrote From Slavery to Freedom, and his definitive memoirs, Mirror to America, where he underscored the fact that George Washington Williams was the first great Black historian back in 1882 who wrote that book. He wrote a book, and what was the title of that book? That was Definitive Scholarship. It 82. So thank you very much. And I think it'd be a good thing for us all to pass this on to our present audience and to our descendants, so we will know exactly, according to the historical record that's authentic, how it all got started.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair Brown, for those remarks and providing additional historical context. So without further ado, I would like to turn to the first panel of today, which is on the historical overview of Black History Month and reparations efforts. So I will now introduce two panelists. Our first panelist is Nkechi Taifa. Nkechi Taifa is founder, principal, and CEO of the Taifa Group, LLC, a social enterprise firm whose mission is to advance justice. She also convenes the Justice Roundtable, a broad network of advocacy groups advancing progressive justice system reform, and serves as a senior fellow at the Center for Justice at Columbia University. Nekichi currently serves on the legal advisory team of the Legacy of the GU 272 Alliance, which are the descendants of the 1838 Jesuit cell of 272 enslaved persons, which ensured the survival of Georgetown University. Nekichi is the past president of the DC chapter of the National Conference of Black Lawyers and a founding member and former co-chair of the Legislative Commission of the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. She is a member of the National African American Reparations Commission and an advisor to the Institute of the Black World 21st Century. We will also hear from Adjoa Ayatoro. Adjoa Ayatoro is a lawyer and activist and the former executive director of the National Conference of Black Lawyers from 1993 to 1997. She was the chief legal consultant to the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, or NCOBRA, and co-chairperson of their Reparations Coordinating Committee. Civil rights lawyer and civic activist Adjoa Ayatoro earned an AB degree in 1967 from Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts, and a master's of social work degree in 1969 from George Warren Brown School of Social Work. In 1978, she graduated cum laude from the St. Louis University School of Law. Ayatoro served as a staff attorney with the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice beginning in 1978, and then joined the National Prison Project of the American Civil Liberties Union Foundation as an attorney in 1982. Ayatoro taught law at American University and served on the law faculty of University of Arkansas at Little Rock. So first we'll hear from Ms. Taifa, and then we'll hear from Ms. Ayatoro. And they both have a noon, and that will also comprise of questions and answers from the task force members. So without further ado, welcome to our two illustrious panelists. And Ms. Taifa, you may begin your expert testimony when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Chair Moore, Vice Chair Brown, esteemed members of the California Reparations Task Force, and public at large. I'd like to start out by saying that what the state of California is engaging in right now is history in the making, and your efforts as the first state to establish a commission to study and develop reparation proposals is to be loudly applauded. I'd like to know if you can see me on the screen right now. Because I don't. Okay. Yes. So my presentation will reflect on the history of the reparations movement in the United States. I have been actively working on issues involving reparations since 1975, at a time when the topic was not popular, when it was on the fringes, not fashionable. It was a time when one would be branded as a militant, which I was, or revolutionary, which I was, or just plain crazy, which I was not. So it gives me much pleasure that today some of the leading minds in this country are promoting the right to and the need for reparations. Now, despite, or perhaps because of today's surge in attention to this issue of longstanding import, I feel it critical that we all understand that the demand for reparations in the United States for unpaid labor and terrorism during the enslavement era and post-slavery discrimination is not novel or new and did not begin in the 21st century. The claim did not drop from the sky with Ta-Nehisi Coates' brilliant Atlantic magazine article, The Case for Reparations, or for Randall Robinson's impassioned book, The Debt, What America Owes to Blacks, both of which galvanized the issue in different decades and thrust it into national conversation. Talk about reparations did not start with Hannah Nicole Jones' article in the New York Times or because of threads on Twitter. Indeed, there has been no substantial period of time when the call for redress has been neglected. Two of the first formal records for reparations in the United States that were pursued and won came from formerly enslaved Black women, Belinda Sutton Royal and Henrietta Wood, who successfully sued their former slave owners estates, Belinda in Massachusetts and Henrietta in Kentucky. At the end of the Civil War, newly freed Black leaders worked closely with General Sherman in fashioning the concept of 40 acres, which he incorporated in his Special Field Order number 15, only to have the critical compensatory provision stripped by President Andrew Johnson. In 1898, Callie House and Isaiah Dickerson spearheaded the first mass-based reparations movement in the United States, the National Ex-Slave Mutual Relief, Bounty, and Pension Association. The organization embraced 600,000 dues-paying members seeking compensation from federal agencies in the form of pensions for the aging persons formerly held in enslavement, their surviving spouses, caregivers, and heirs. Callie House was targeted, wrongly convicted, and imprisoned for a year and a day on bogus mail fraud charges in 1917 for her grassroots organizing work. On the heels of Callie House's movement was Marcus Garvey and the Universal Improvement Association during the early part of the 20th century, which galvanized hundreds of thousands of Black people. And that movement was also destabilized by government forces and Garvey unjustly imprisoned and deported. One of his followers, Queen Mother Audley Moore, born in Louisiana in 1898, championed the cause of reparations throughout the 20th century. But she was perhaps the most vocal advocate for reparations during the 1950s and 60s. In both 1957 and 1959, she presented a petition to the United Nations against genocide and for self-determination and land, and was active in every major reparations movement until her death in 1996. Malcolm X talked about the concept of reparations in his speeches. Martin Luther King proposed a Bill of Rights for the Disadvantaged, which emphasized redress for both the historical victimization and exploitation of Blacks, as well as their present-day degradation. Consistently, the Nation of Islam's publications, Muhammad Speaks and later The Final Call, demanded that the United States exempt Black people from all taxation as long as we are deprived of equal justice. In 1966, the Black Panther Party listed the issue of payback for slave labor and the overdue debt of 40 acres as point number 3 of their 10-point program. In 1968, the Provisional Government of the Republic of New Africa proclaimed in its Declaration of Independence that we claim no rights from the United States of America other than those rights belonging to oppressed people anywhere in the world, and these include the right to damages, reparations. In April 1969, the Black Manifesto was adopted at the National Black Economic Development Conference, which included a demand that white churches and synagogues pay $500 million in reparations to Black people in the U.S., touted as only the beginning of the amount owed. The following month, civil rights activist James Forman interrupted Sunday service at the Riverside Church in New York to announce the reparations demand from his Black Manifesto. In 1972, the National Black Political Convention in Gary, Indiana, adopted the anti-depression program of the Republic of New Africa, an act authorizing the payment of a sum of money in reparations for slavery and a negotiating committee between representatives of the United States and the Black nation to determine kind, dates, and other details of paying reparations. The Mississippi Loyalist delegation to the Democratic National Convention accepted the anti-depression program that same year. Throughout the 1960s through the 1980s, just about every radical Black organization had the issue of reparations as part of their platform in some way, shape, form, or fashion, including the African People's Socialist Party, whose African National Reparations Organization spearheaded annual reparations tribunals, the December 12th movement, which mobilized internationally, the People's Organization, the National Black United Front, just to name a few. Broad national attention to the call for reparations for descendants of Africans enslaved in the United States unquestionably accelerated with the 1987 founding of the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, NCOBRA. The spark for its founding emanated from a September 1987 conference on race and the Constitution at Harvard Law School, spearheaded by the National Conference of Black Lawyers. Reparations had always been a part of Black nationalist and Pan-Africanist agendas, but now there was interest from a Black legal organization fueled by receptiveness from a key NCBL leader and fellow panelist at this hearing, Adjoa Ayatoro. She invited Imari Obadele, president of the Republic of New Africa, Chokwe Lumumba, co-founder of the New African People's Organization, and myself, along with economist Richard America, to address the issue of the constitutionality of reparations on the panel at Harvard and to discuss whether the U.S. Constitution should be amended with a reparations demand. The three of us longstanding champions in the New African Independence Movement jointly concluded that there was no need to amend the Constitution because the basis for the Black nation's claim for reparations already existed within it. Our presentations from that conference were compiled in a small, power-packed, but lengthy title book published in 1987 called Reparations Yes, the Legal and Political Reasons Why New Africans, Black people in the United States should be paid now for the enslavement of our ancestors and for war against us after slavery. Our presentations were replete with historical precedents for reparations, New African political science, and analysis of international law, including our revolutionary fervor promoting the right to self-determination. Indeed, we felt the issue of self-determination for the descendants of Africans held as slaves in the United States to be key and central to a reparatory justice demand. Why? Because after the enslavement era, Black people never had the opportunity to decide for ourselves what our future would hold, with full appreciation of our options and reparations to put our choices into reality. Would we repatriate back to Africa? If so, how? Would we settle in the independent Haiti Republic or somewhere else in the diaspora? Would we accept the U.S. offer of 14th Amendment citizenship into the new white nation they were developing and strive to make a multiracial democracy real? Due to severed homeland ties, will we plant our own flag in the ground in this country that we worked and built, negotiate with the native peoples, and establish our own independent Black nation on this soil? Our theory was that a reparations settlement must include the manifestation of each of these options through a national plebiscite, inclusive of both direct and group benefits. For those who wish to repatriate, they should have sufficient resources to make that reintegration a reality, as well as for those who wish to immigrate elsewhere. For those who wish to force this country to respect our rights as full citizens, that option must be accompanied by transformative change in policies and practices, closure of the Black-white wealth gap, elimination of educational and health disparities, cessation of mass incarceration disproportionately impacting Black people, and release of Black political prisoners. And for those who wish to establish an independent nation state on this soil, following the model of 5 states in the South or elsewhere, to likewise have the economic resources and political diplomatic recognition to make that self-determination choice a reality. Thus, the issue of reparations for brothers Imari, Chokwe, and myself was nothing new. It wasn't anything special or separate from what we have been engaged in for years as part of the New African Independence Movement. But what would come next and how it was handled was pivotal to the momentum that we see today. Black Reparations Commission President Dorothy Lewis, who worked closely with the Republic of New Africa and the African National Reparations Organization, had earlier witnessed firsthand while living in Alaska the Native Alaskan land claim reparations lawsuit and envisioned a similar result for African descendants in the U.S. She urged RNA President Imari Obadele to convene a national gathering on reparations to discuss how to increase its exposure and make the issue of reparations a household word. I credit Brother Imari for downplaying the new African independence politics outlined in our co-authored Reparations Yes book and agreeing to issue the call for reparations-loving people to convene in Washington to discuss, among other agenda items, how to move the issue of reparations for Black people in the United States forward. President Imari could have demanded that everyone had to refer to Black people as, quote, new Africans, but he didn't. He could have demanded that the only way forward was nation-to-nation reparations, but he didn't. We all could have succumbed to the very present U.S. government orchestrated COINTELPRO counterintelligence program that was tearing Black and progressive organizations apart, but we didn't. The higher ground was taken. And Imari Obadele made the unifying call for a mass-based gathering of activists not beholden to any specific ideology. And it was out of that historic September 26, 1987 gathering that the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, NCOBA, was born, bringing diverse groups under one umbrella. It was the perfect storm. The Black Power movement was open and receptive to a broad-based approach to advance the issue of reparations. The Black activist legal community largely sanctioned the Black nationalist effort, and we all were invigorated by the movement of the Civil Liberties Act in Congress, which would become law the following year, granting reparations to Japanese Americans. And so, it was in the throes of that fertile environment that NCOBA picked up the long-standing mantle of justice, reinvigorated the demand for reparations for the descendants of Africans enslaved in the United States, and broadened the concept through massive public education, accompanied by legislative and litigation-based initiatives. And I would like to briefly reflect on the new movement's legislative strategies and the progenitors of the modern era reparation litigation strategies, Ajura Adutoro and Deidre Palman Farmer, are witnesses with me at this hearing today, and I'm sure they'll discuss the pivotal work they have been involved with on litigation fronts. Encouraged by the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, which granted reparations to Japanese Americans, and in response to the dogged persistence of a Detroit constituent known as Reparations Ray Jenkins, Congressman John Conyers expressed interest in introducing a reparations bill for the enslavement era and its vestiges in Congress. He felt that the recent passage of reparations for Japanese Americans, which started with a commission to study the issue, would be a strong precedent for Black people. Was everyone in this latest iteration of the reparations movement on one accord with a reparations study bill? Absolutely not. There were heated differences of opinion with many in the movement, questioning the need for continued study, that it was time for reparations now. Differences in strategy are not new. There were differences within the Japanese American community as to their strategy for reparations. There were differences with Jewish communities as to strategies. The key to success, however, lies in how differences are handled. Do they devolve into negative personal attacks, or are they handled with respectful discussion and analysis? After invigorating principled debate and an agreement to respectfully disagree by some, the majority strategic decision was made to work closely with Congressman Conyers and his staff in fashioning federal legislation. This resulted in the 1989 introduction of the Commission to Study Reparation Proposals for African Americans Act, later to be numbered H.R. 40, in remembrance of the thwarted 19th century promise to provide freed Blacks 40 acres and a mule. In essence, Representative Conyers' Study Commission bill provided the cover and the vehicle to have a public policy discussion on the issue of reparations, not only in the Congress of the United States, but across the country as well. As chair of NCOBA's Legislative Commission during those early years, the approach proved to be powerfully strategic. Its beauty was that the HR Study Commission bill was a less threatening and much easier approach through which to garner the much needed support for the concept of reparations that had been lacking in America and across the country. Indeed, it was the perfect education and mobilization tool that served to fertilize the ground for later broader mainstream acceptance. From 1990 through the early years of the 21st century, NCOBRA chapter members and supporters influenced several state legislatures and scores of city councils across the country to pass reparation-themed legislation or resolutions endorsing H.R. 40. In 1990, the Louisiana House of Representatives passed a resolution in support of reparations. In 1991, State Senator Bill Owens introduced legislation into the Massachusetts Senate providing for the payment of reparations for slavery. The